Alright, y'all, good morning. Another world according to romance. It is dark as shit out. I'm still filming every day at the same time. The days are getting shorter, if you don't notice. But I gotta film this. Today's the first day I wrote a script. Look at that. I actually made a script for today's work. This is the first time I tried that, so I might be pausing. Second off, this is by request for John Thomas Loper. Buddy, I love you. You gotta give me my computers back. Either fix them or get them back to me, buddy. I gotta record. But this one's for you. You requested it. Going out to you. This is gonna be Noah versus Gilgamesh. Now, unless you live on friggin' Mars or some shit. Oh, and one more thing before we start. Please, please, if you're my friend, if you care about my children, if you care about my well-being, the littlest thing you could do to help me is please go to YouTube. Look up The World According to Romance and subscribe to it. That's the best thing you can do for me right now, for real. If you can, it takes nothing at all from you. Like me on YouTube, man. Comment on YouTube. All that shit. I get props on YouTube when you do it. I get nothing on Facebook when you do it. Alright, so unless you live on fucking Mars, you gotta know the story of Noah and the animals and the ark. You have to. I don't really gotta explain that, do I? The question is, and the issue here is, it's a great little story. It's a story that teaches children about animals and being good and rainbows and shit like that. It's got everything you want. Unfortunately, I now believe, and I believe 100% that all of what you see in the Genesis up until the story of Abraham is all a echo of a Jewish past that happened not in Israel, but in Sumer. Now, Sumerians, what is Sumer? The Sumerian, I'm gonna do another video too on, because I kind of did research for two videos at once here. I want to explain the Middle East. Like everyone says Babylonia. Well, Babylonia only lasted like 200 years as an empire. All right, like proper. It was it was the Akkadians. For a while, the Medes took Babylon. There was a while where the Assyrians ran all of the Middle East. There was a while where the Akkadians did. But the first of all, before anything, before anyone, was the Sumerians. They were just at the base of the Tigris and the Euphrates River, where they dump into the Persian Gulf. They had many cities there, and that is where civilization began. It began in other places around the same time. It began in China, around where Peking is now. Began at the end of the Indus River in Pakistan. There's nothing there now. Began in Egypt, and it began in Mesopotamia. And when they talk about Mesopotamia, ancient Mesopotamia, they're usually talking about Sumeria if they're talking about something old. Well, in the early parts of archaeology, in the 1800s, okay, actually in 1848, the great archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley was doing his excavations in the city of Uruk, and he kept coming across these tablets. Now, the Sumerians were also not just the givers of civilization, but they were, I'm not convinced that they started writing before the Egyptians. However, they did have writing proper first. They had a language. You know, the Egyptians used hieroglyphs, and that developed into hieratic, another language in Egyptian. And then that eventually turned into Coptic, which is only spoken by Christian monks in this day and age. But that's the last remnant left of the Egyptian language. In Sumeria, they had a writing system that was complex. It could tell past tense. It could tell possessives. You know what I mean? Interjections, grammar, parts of speech. It had all this complex shit, and we're talking 3500 BC that this writing started going into effect. So when Leonard Woolley starts excavating Uruk in 1848, he keeps finding these little things that look like wallets, little brown little stones, and there's little wedges all over them. He's like, man, this looks a lot like writing. And they came to the conclusion this is writing. And for years, nobody could figure out what the hell it said. And as usual, look, the dopest museum in the world is not the Louvre. The Louvre, art, and that's for art and fucking sculptures and shit, that's cute. Real archaeologists hang at the British Museum in London. That's the #1, that's where King Tut shit is at. Howard Carter worked for the British Museum. Like, all the Elgin marbles are in the British Museum. The British Museum is the shit. It's the best museum on earth. And a dude who worked for the British Museum in 1872, his name was Joseph Smith, who looked like your typical weirdo from the 1800s with a big, huge, funky beard and just typical 1800s guy. Somehow he cracked the code in 1872 and he started reading this story. They started reading what these ancient people were saying. And at first, he found, like, you know, a bunch of documents. Oh, well, another thing is that by the time 1872 came, another in Nineveh, in the city of Nineveh, a little boy there found a shitload more of these little tablets that they wrote on. And ever since then, they keep finding, even today, there's still shit turning up in cuneiform writing. We're still turning over things from the past that we never knew because we can read this writing, because Joseph Smith deciphered it. But as he's reading, you know, first he's reading shit like documents for deeds and marriage licenses and shit, like formal stuff. Then he finds this story, and it's just a fragment of a story, because the cache of the library that was found in Nineveh by the little Syrian boy, that library happened to belong to Ashurbanipal II, none other than the Assyrian king. If you've ever heard of the Assyrian conquest of Israel, Ashurbanipal was the guy who conquested Israel. Ashurbanipal II. They found his library, and in it, they found a part of this story, and then they went back to other things they found, and they found the entire story, and it is the story of a hero called Gilgamesh. It is an epic. Now, you know epics before. A lot of nationality, almost every nationality or every people has their mythic story. Like the English have Beowulf. The Greeks have, will you marry me? The Greeks have the Iliad and Odyssey, you know what I'm saying? We have Star Wars. Like, that's just a story that if they ain't, like, in 2,000, 5,000 years from now, if they can dig up all of our data somehow, see, at least with cuneiform, there's shit left. No matter what happens, that cuneiform is going to be there. Once our shit goes down, all our stuff is paperless now. I don't know, they're going to think we're like bums in the future. But they might not be able to find Star Wars, but that's our epic, okay? Well, it's a story we tell each other over and over, and it somehow is our story, even though it has nothing to do with America. It's an American classic. It actually, Star Wars is a Western combined with a World War II movie. It's based off the movie The Searchers, John Wayne movie. Just let you know. All right, so they kept reading this story, and the story is reading almost exactly. There's a part of it, at one part he found, where the hero named Gilgamesh. Now, Gilgamesh is the story of the epic of Gilgamesh. It's basically like a Marlboro Man and Harley Davidson story. It's like two dudes on Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. It's that type of story. It's basically Gilgamesh is the king of a city of Uruk. Uruk is in the Bible, but it's called Erech, E-R-E-C-H. Also, it's believed that Gilgamesh himself is in the Bible. He is known as Nimrud, and he started a city called Nimrod, which sounds funny to us, but believe me, Gilgamesh was no Nimrod. He was the perfect man. He was like a Hercules. He was like a Superman. He was bulking, big. He was the perfect man. Nobody could fuck with him. He was the king of Uruk, which was the biggest city in Sumeria at the time. And he was an asshole. And Uruk there was gods living in every city. Uruk's main god was Inanna, the goddess of beauty and love. But she was a seductress. And she kept trying to seduce Gilgamesh, and he kept turning her down. You know, and the gods didn't like that. And the gods didn't like that he was an asshole to the people. So they said, we're going to get this Gilgamesh. So they make his counterpart. They make a Gilgamesh who is hairy and wild and is not civilized. Civilization is just new at this point, so it's a big deal to them. All right. So, and the name of this guy is Enkidu. I'm not making this shit up, dude. Enkidu and Gilgamesh go on all these adventures. They fight dragons. First they fight each other. They wrestle. They beat the shit out of each other to the point where they figure out, hey man, we're not enemies. We're friends. And then they go on all these adventures. They go to the forest that's not there anymore, but there's a famous forest in Lebanon, a cedar forest. He goes there. He goes hunting lions. Back when he lived in Sumeria, lions still roamed the Middle East. And there was still forests in the Middle East, like apparently. But Enkidu dies, and this bums out Gilgamesh. And he starts like talking to the gods, and he starts asking around his town, like, what is the meaning of life? How can I live forever? How can I be immortal? He wants to be a god. He thinks he is technically half God, but he wants to live forever. He does not want to be mortal. So the gods tell him, go to, I forget the name of the town, but it's the oldest of the towns in Sumeria. Like, Babylon is actually one of the newest Sumerian towns. I don't even think it was built while Sumeria existed, or just the Sumerians were at their end when they built Babylon. But no, the name of the guy was Utnapishtim. I wrote it down. I would never remember that. And Utnapishtim had been living for thousands of years, and he lived in this village, this old village. And Gilgamesh went up to him and said, how did you do it? How did you live forever? What is your secret? And he said, the gods were mad at me, but they told me that if they're going to get me, and they're going to come at me. But I was told by another god that had pity on me, that if I build a boat, a coracle, okay? Now this is not an ark. They never say the word ark, although ark is a Sumerian word. So is Eden, so is Adam, so is Eve, so is Babylon. Everything in the early parts of Genesis is all Sumerian. So he says, yeah, a rival god, the gods were pissed off at me, and they said they're going to destroy my town with rain. So one god who was like still down with me told me to build a coracle. And a coracle is a big round boat made of leather animal hide. I don't know how the fuck you make a boat out of animal hide, but they did it. They did it all over the world. I guess leather gets real tough and hardcore when it's dried or whatever, but it was a coracle. It was a big round boat with a roof on it. It was basically a humongous inner tube. And it wasn't designed to sail. It was just designed to float long enough so that, you know, the waters would subside and you would still be alive. Okay? And he says, the gods made such a terrible storm that even they got afraid. And they hid in their mountain hideouts. And it rained in the Gilgamesh story, it only rained for 7 days. And he brought all the animals that he knew of. Okay, that's a big, huge factor. Like, in our modern sensibilities, we like to think in black and white, and like, well, the world is 4,400 years old, and all the animals ever created, dinosaurs and everything went on that ark. You know, like, it was just not physically possible. It's not zoologically possible for what happened to Noah to actually have occurred. So you know it, I know it. There's no way every animal in the fucking world got on this this old man's boat in this fucking southern deserts of Iraq and saved the world. They took every goat, they took cows, chickens, the shit they knew, which isn't that long of a list. It's not like every animal in the world lives in southern Iraq. So on day 7, he said, I forget what, it only rained for 7 days, and it stops. So when it stops, he sends out a dove. The dove comes back in a day. Next day, he sends out a raven. Oh, I'm sorry, he sends out a swallow. Swallow comes back in a day. Day 3, he sends out a raven. Raven never comes back. He knows there's land out there. He finds it. He waits for the waters to subside, and then he starts populating the earth again, okay? And he lived, because the gods were so impressed that he lived through that storm, they granted him immortality. So that's pretty much where the importance of Gilgamesh ends, and where, you know, the similarities kind of end. But for the most part, the whole entire, everything that he does, like he takes 8 people, you know what I mean? Noah takes 8 people. He sends 3 birds, Noah sends 2, you know what I mean? Like, it's very, so much of a similar echo going on there that, you know, it's all right. So, now, the main thing that I said in that last point was that, all right, you have a God. Now, the God we know of, the Noah story, that is a monotheistic God. That is a perfect God. He never does anything wrong. He knows everything. Everything he does in the Bible is right and righteous and everything. He never makes a mistake. The other gods, the gods of the Gilgamesh story, are polytheistic gods. So they like fight with each other. They have sex with humans. This is polytheism. This is how polytheism works. So you're looking at 2 different, very, very styles of God. Now, the second thing I want to put out there is that 100% of all human race started around rivers. You need a river to start a human settlement. It's that simple. You need a river to fish. You need a river to clean. You need constant running water. You have a toilet in your house. That's a little river. You have a shower in your house. That's a little. You need water. Humans need water. And especially in the ancient world, look, rivers are unpredictable. They flood. The Nile, they needed the floods because the Nile's a different river. I'm going to get into a show on that all by itself. But these rivers in Mesopotamia flooded. They flooded a lot. And when they flooded, it was devastating. And again, that's why there's flood stories all over the world, because all of humanity grew around rivers. So basically, and the other reason that this happens is, again, I said that they gave us writing, and they were a literate society, the Sumerians, and they would stay a literate society for the rest of time. They still are a literate society today. They never stopped being that. Okay. They think that both the Iliad and the Odyssey, definitely I believe the Iliad and the Odyssey came to us, and there's so many copies of it around because it was used to teach children how to read. It's used in schools to teach you how to become literate. So they use it as an example. It's not just that they're so proud of that story and it's such a great story that there's mad copies of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Right now, as it stands, the oldest copy from Sumeria of the Epic of Gilgamesh dates from 1900 BC. Okay, that's when it was written. Now, it's almost certainly Bardic. It was probably being told at least 1,000, probably 2,000 years before that, maybe even longer. What we have in the Bible, the Noah story, now most of what the Judeo-Christian world believes is that Moses composed the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch. Now, he was writing and using a collection of stories that was given down to him, and again, that probably took thousands of years, but nobody knows where it came from. Moses is the genesis of the Bible. Moses is believed to have lived somewhere between 1500 and 1220 BC, but the Bible never gets written down and given out to the public, or it does, but we don't have any copies. The oldest copy we have of the Bible is from King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah was a regent king who lived in around the 600s to 700s BC, and he was a client of, he came after Solomon and after Saul and David and all that shit. Actually, during that time, the rest of the world, the Iron Age began, the Bronze Age collapsed, so they went through kind of all these little kingdoms popped up, and Judea and Israel emerged, and that was kind of their great period. And when you're reading the Bible, you're reading, yo man, what a dickhead, what a small penis dickhead. Nickelback, really? So anyways, the oldest copy we have of the Bible dates from about 750 BC. That doesn't mean that's how old the Bible is, but that's the oldest copy we have. The oldest copy of Gilgamesh, again, is 1900 BC. So, Gilgamesh versus Noah, you decide. It's been a long one today. This is my longest video yet, but I guess that's what happens when you plan shit out. One other thing that I want to mention that for everyone out there, sadly, while I was doing the research for this, it was just as I suspected. This happened during Saddam Hussein. He used to destroy temples and historic stuff, although Saddam Hussein did actually rebuild stuff. He rebuilt the Blue Gates of Babylon. The Taliban in Afghanistan, they destroyed the Bamiyan Buddhas, these 3 humongous Buddhas. They destroyed them. Like, they destroyed all kinds of like Persian history and stuff. Now it's happening. ISIS is doing it in Syria. Like the city of Nineveh, it's not going to be there much longer to do archaeological work. And the archaeologists are getting kicked out of Syria and Iraq, left and right, and they're destroying everything. There's a city called Mara in Syria. It's gone, bro. This ISIS destroyed it. We can no longer do research there. They're basically, look, you can march on people. You can shoot people. That takes balls, you know what I'm saying? It does take balls to strap a bomb to an 8-year-old and send them on a bus full of other 8-year-olds and blow that bus up. Give you props. Now, I take away props, but at least that takes balls. It takes no balls whatsoever to blow up a 3,500-year-old ziggurat. And they're just denying you and the rest of the world our history. It is not just Syrian history. It is everybody's history. And I'll quote Indiana Jones, that shit all belongs in museums, not in the hands of ISIS. So keep your eyes posted. Unfortunately, the archaeological world is under attack by Muslim extremists with small dicks. Have a great day. My name is Richie Romance. Please like me on Facebook, like me and comment on YouTube if you can. Peace.